Good afternoon and welcome to Conversations Aren't Showing Up for Kids. My name's Tim Markle. I'm coming from my spacious windowless office at the University of Wisconsin-Madison out of the Waisman Center. I'm director of the Children's Resource Center South. We have been renamed from the Southern Regional Center to the Children's Resource Center. We are one of 5 Children's Resource Centers throughout Wisconsin, which is really convenient because there used to be 5 regional centers. So now there's 5 children's resource centers. So it works out really well, especially as they're in exactly the same place as the regional centers used to be. It's just a name change. Same fantastic people, same services. Today, we are having conversations are showing up for kids, and today is our parent panel. 2 of our standing members of the parent panel, Pearl and Amanda, are here, and we are joined with other folks as well, and we're excited about that. And we want to talk a little bit about, sometimes you just can't get out of the house. Are there ways that families who have children with special health care needs and disabilities, is there ways to make a difference without even leaving the home? And what have you heard from other families? What have you tried? I'll stick in my own nose there occasionally, but let's just have a talk about, how parents are needed to voice concerns all the time, but sometimes we feel like we're never getting out of the house, or the times they want us to get out of the house just aren't very convenient for us. So how can families still have an impact?
So I guess I'll start. My name's Pearl, and I'm in northern Wisconsin, but I've been adopted by Tim and the group to join in the southern area, and I'm very, very honored. So
I guess knowing that you're originally from Texas, this is like the midpoint.
I mean, it really is.
Yeah,
It's we're meeting halfway.
yeah, we're meeting halfway.
So I have, I guess, a perspective from like a rural area where we're not really physically close to a lot of things. So we have to get creative on how we can still voice um, our concerns, our opinions, and what we feel matters. Um, One thing that I'm surprised to learn is that a lot of parents, well, community in general, are not familiar that most of the boards and committees that are existent in the state have public hearing. It's not just city hall, it's not just your county board, um, governors committees, DPIs councils, parent advisory councils, they all have public comment. And you do not have to be physically present in order to give it. Um, you can attend via phone, you can attend via Zoom. If you do not have a computer and you're working with your phone and it's hard for you to see the agenda and kind of know what's going on, they will mail you a hard copy prior so you have an idea of what's being discussed, if there's anything else that you want to, address during public comment. So I find that's a nice way to get your voice heard on a bigger level. Like for committees that are with DPI, which is Department of Public Instruction, which oversees all the school districts. Or if you're wanting to get your voice heard by the governmental, Council of Persons with Disability, who has the governor's ear, right? Or if you're wanting to address, the Birth to 3 committee, because you have a newborn or someone under the age of 3, and you're finding that, something that they're doing maybe isn't working in your area and they might not be aware of it. So input is always wanted, I will say, by these committees and councils, because they don't know what to do moving forward to achieve their vision statement or achieve what their goals are if they don't have input from the community telling them if the way that they're going is what the community wants, right? All the heart's there, the intention's there, but unless they have input from who they're serving, which would be the community, it's really hard for them to kind of know where to go. So having the time to devote, 5, 10, 15 minutes to do public comment, um, is a great way to, one, see what the committees and councils are working on, and two, to give your input. And you don't even have to change out of your pajamas, which is great. I've attended many in my pajamas, and they are none the wiser. It's fantastic. It's great. Another thing that I would say that is useful is gaining your knowledge, right? Like, you want to understand, if you have issues about special education, are you taking the free trainings that are provided by the state, that are virtual, that are pre-recorded, that you can do on your own time? Are you researching the councils and the committees that are out there, like Disability Rights of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Facets, um, DPDD, which is the Department of People with Developmental Disabilities. I mean, there's Wisconsin Family Ties, Wisconsin Voices. I mean, there's so many organizations and agencies out there that you feel overwhelmed. I say you pick the one that is best suited for what issues you're having, or what questions you have, or where you want to put your time to help them achieve their goals, and start there. And you're like, well, how do I pick out of all of them? Well, they all have websites, and honestly, talk to other parents too. Most of us have interacted with one or many. You might have seen them at, conferences. You might have heard about them from your case managers for special education or for your children's long-term services. And honestly, if you still don't know, reach out to your children's resource centers. I mean, they would be able to help you kind of have an idea of which councils or committees or agencies would be best for your time, because they work with them daily. And I don't know of a resource center who would not love that phone call, to be able to help. So that's another way to kind of start the journey, I would say. Amanda, do you have any thoughts or suggestions?
Well, I was thinking, like you, also even starting smaller than, like statewide, and things that really affect all of us, is even starting at home a little bit more too. And maybe lots of PTA meetings and things like that tend to be on Zoom these days. That's like the one good thing that came out of the pandemic, is everything's on Zoom. Or even just helping, like baking cookies for the PTA, lunch or whatever that they're doing, just to kind of get involved at the school level. Because I think knowing the teachers, not just your kid's teacher, but all the teachers at the school, they all know my kids, so now I know them. Get involved with that. And also all these trainings that Pearl was talking about, there are so many. And even just finding things that match your values as a family, and learning more about your kid's disability and other people who have that disability, and other families who are living with it, and learning how learning from other people of how you want to maybe work with your kid, and how your family wants to run with these kids that operate in a different manner than the rest of us do. So I think I've learned a lot from seeking out and finding different people who have been through what I'm going through now, and learning from them on things that have worked with their kids, and just kind of figuring out what our household can do to make it the best place for our kid to grow up and learn. So big and small.
I
I
love
love that.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I really want to just agree with it's sometimes hard and overwhelming with all the information that is out there, but we now have more information at our fingertips, literally, than any other generation before us. And so one of the things that, we talked that I like talk to parents about is that before you go into a fight, make sure you understand the rules of engagement. Know if you have a question about children's long-term support, then learn a little bit more about children's long-term support than just what you know from your case manager. Learn
Right.
more about special education than what you know from your IEP team. Is reach out to like Wisconsin Facets, go through their IEP trainings, and because the old saying information is power is really true. Is if we understand the language, if we understand the system that's out there, then we're going to be able to engage better with it. And that means we're going to be able to make change better. And that's stuff that you could do in your pajamas at 2 a.m. As that child is finally falling asleep. We have that. So I am a big proponent of finding those webinars, finding those informations, finding those trainings. Like you said, a lot of
Right.
them are recorded. Build your brain with more information.
Yes. And I would even add on top of Amanda with thinking like with the schools, right? Like with the PTA and the baking and stuff. A lot of times they need help assembling packets, like the back to school packets, the fundraiser packets or whatever. That's stuff that can be dropped off at your home that you can do at home and then send with your kid on the bus, or they can come and pick it up. I mean, they're always willing to kind of work around it. And I've done like calendar raffles that my daughter used to do when she was at a different school. And I would assemble the calendar raffles for all the kids at her school at home. Again, not changing out of my jammies. Like it was anything that I can do to stay in my pajamas for the day, I call a win. So if I can help the school take that load off, but they're still feeling super grateful and I'm still building the relationships because I'm meeting the people that are dropping off the packets and then picking them up and then they're saying thank you, and so you still can build those personal relationships in your pajamas. And honestly, if anybody gives you a hard time about pajamas, they just don't understand the comfiness of pajamas. So, and there's a reason that there's a PJ day for the kids at school.
Yeah,
Because
I wish the whole world would realize that when we're more comfortable, our brains work better.
I think that's why we got so much work done during the pandemic.
Yeah. I just think it's really true.
Yeah. And you can, I find that when I'm in my pajamas, I feel a little more sure of myself to speak up at like those meetings because I'm not having like 20 million faces looking at me. It's just me and the one person who's like on the screen, right? It's like, okay, I'm working the Zoom. I think I'm doing it right. Like it's great. And so you don't have to worry about, well, what are they going to think of me? What if they don't like the way I'm dressed? Or what if I say something stupid? None of that matters because you're just a red button of leave meeting away. And so you're still in control. You're in control of, if you start to feel anxiety or if you start to feel stressed or if you're feeling that it's not a good fit, you have the option then to walk away at any point without standing out, which is great.
Well,
So
that reminds me too that there's this thing going on out there called survey fatigue. Is that we're being surveyed and we're being asked about things just in infinitum. But there's some things that come across that I try to let families know about because this input is really important. Like if there's going to be possible changes to the children's long-term support waiver, we need the family input. When the maternal child health department of Wisconsin comes out with their needs assessment, well, that includes more families that just have disabilities and special health care needs. So if our voices don't get in there, then our needs aren't going to be part of the assessment. And so I'll push. So look at what comes across as what they're asking your opinion on, and figure out is there really another group that's going to provide this insight? Or is this one that I need to spend my time on because I have this unique point of view and this insight? So I need to make the names of myself and my fellow members of the disability community known.
Right. I would also like to remind families to know that anything that's required will have a time commitment. Whether it's you taking time out to do the trainings, to do the research, to attend, via phone call, via Zoom or whatever. That's time, right? So it's a time commitment. It's you saying that you are going to commit to whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And realizing that if you feel overwhelmed, it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to stop for a bit and then come back at it, or try a different avenue to see if your voice is maybe heard, more effectively another way. And that's okay. Sometimes you might start and go and say, you know what, I did the public comment and it just didn't really seem like they cared that I was there, and I don't want to do it again. That's fine. That's completely fine. Try a different one, or do something different, right? Instead of doing public comment, maybe email the committee and say, hey, I would like to talk to the chairman, over the phone, one-on-one, to just kind of see what's going on with the committee and kind of share my story, right? And sometimes that's all it takes. But again, time commitment. You're setting that time aside to do that. And make sure that the time commitment that you set for yourself is realistic for you. I always like to say less is more, because if you go in head first, dive all the way in, you're going to get overwhelmed very quickly. Definitely test the waters, pinky toe at a time, to get a feel for it and to gain the experience on, for you to see what works or what might not work. So that's kind of what I've got.
The other thing that comes to mind that I was thinking about is the fact that one of the ways that I love learning more and that I love meeting people is going to conferences. Sometimes I can only go for a day. Sometimes I'm able to make the 2 days. But a lot of the conferences that I go to, at the end is usually this, hey, if you want to be involved in planning this conference next year, feel free to join our steering team. Well, I got to tell you, statewide conferences, all their meetings are through Zoom. They're not all traveling together in one place to plan this conference. It's all being done virtually from homes. So if there's a conference that you really enjoy or that you want to help impact, reach out to the planners and say, hey, can I be part of the planning team? Can I give input? Could I be they're always looking for people to review proposals. So if you go to a conference and you hate your breakouts, then get on their proposal review committee so that you can choose proposals that you want to go see, that you think other families want to go see. I do not know a conference where they're sitting there going, no, we have plenty of people to look at the evaluations because or the proposals. Everybody loves doing that. And no, they are almost always looking for people to review the proposals. And again, that's the work that's being done out of the homes, but it's a great way to affect change. And feel free to put any thoughts in you don't need to unmute or anything, but please feel free to put any more thoughts in the chat as well. And I will make sure to relay them, because we of course want to have everybody's experience. That's the more brains, the better, is what I very much believe in my work. So any other thoughts that you have out there?
I would say another option too, as opposed to just the school setting and conferences and agencies and councils, support groups, right? So many support groups are virtual now. And sometimes they need somebody to share their story for like a topic, or they need somebody to host the virtual meetings because life's gotten hectic and they work in the evenings or whatever, and so they're always looking for people who want to take time out of their lives to help with that. So if you have a support group even that's near and dear to you that meets in person, but they're wondering maybe why so many people aren't coming anymore, why have the numbers decreased, maybe offer a virtual option. Our support groups, a lot of them in the rural area up here are virtual just because they cover such a wide area. And let's face it, driving in the snow in northern Wisconsin, not fun in the winter.
And that's only what, 10 out of the 12 months of the year that you guys have snow, something like that.
Maybe 11 out of 12, but it is what it is. But knowing that we can do those meetings virtually really helped us, I would think, especially during the pandemic, helped us feel connected still, helped us feel like we weren't in this on our own, helped remind us of the community that we have with our support groups. And honestly, even things like this, where we're showing up for the kids and we're having the conversations with the parent panels, we've given that time to do that. And we're always looking for other parents who want to share, right? We're always looking for people who have an idea or a thought or an experience that could be similar to ours or could also be very different. And something as easy as maybe having that be your first step of, well, I don't want to show my face because I'm pretty nervous. Well, then you don't have to. You can be turn the screen off and just participate verbally, or just type your answers. I mean, really, there's so many accommodations out there, and nobody is going to say that they don't want you. Our experiences as parents of kids with disabilities or adults with disabilities matter. And everybody's story is different. Everybody's experience and knowledge is different, which is why our voices matter. Matters 10 times more in your PJs, but that's just me. Amanda, do you have like any other thoughts or like anything else that you've done or witnessed or seen that, besides like school setting, but maybe like in community that I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head?
I don't know. I think you've covered a lot. I mean, yeah, the support groups, and I mean, I think also we, even going back to more of the statewide things, making sure we are writing letters to our representatives and things like that, making sure that anytime a Medicaid topic comes up, or things involving public school funding, we should all be, even if it's just the form letter that's recommended that you send, we can all do that in our pajamas or regular clothes from our phones, to send them to our national, state, local representatives, to make sure that our voices are heard there too. I think it seems like maybe it's such a big thing, they won't listen to me, but I do think those letters and thoughts add up, and they're there to represent us. So, and then also vote accordingly.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. And there's a way for you to vote without getting out of your car. If you have a disability, that's all I'm saying. It's like, you don't have to get out of, you can go vote in your pajamas. I'm sorry, pajamas is like my theme today. I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the pajama thing. I'm so sorry. But yes, with getting out to your legislators and writing the letters. Oh my goodness, yes. There's so many bills that are constantly brought out. And if they think, oh, well, if we're not hearing anything bad, then it must be good. But they don't have the experience or the knowledge, right? So definitely, I love using the templates with the copy paste. Not gonna lie, find that super helpful. But it's still sharing my story. So I'm glad you brought that up. Like it totally just went by me. I completely forgot about that. So awesome. Thank you for reminding me. You're amazing.
Well, personally, I kind of like leaving on amazing notes. So, seeing as how we've decided that Amanda's amazing, and I know everybody else who is on this call is amazing as well, because you took time out to be here, to learn, to chat, to interact, I think we're going to call it an afternoon. And thank you, family panel. We'll see you guys, you folks again in November, when we will be talking about we're going to be talking, let's see, is it, when are we, November 15th, we're going to talk about self-care on a budget, taking care of yourself when you can't afford to fly to Sedona, which is how I would personally like to take care of myself, but it's not happening. And then we'll also be here December 6th with a very special one talking about making IEPs palatable. And we'll continue to tease it that way and figure out, you're going to show up December 6th to figure out what that's all about. Thank you, Pearl and Amanda. Thank you, the other people that are showing up. We couldn't do this without all of you. Have a great afternoon. Oh,
Take
and
care.
I
I'll
think
send out an evaluation at some point. Thanks. Bye-bye.